The grand ballroom at the Riverside Convention Center was packed with over 400 people: superintendents, principals, school board members, teachers, district administrators, everyone who mattered in education within a 3-state region. I was sitting at table 17, wearing the best suit I owned, a charcoal gray number I'd bought specifically for tonight. My hands were clenched in my lap, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. On stage, Dr. Patricia Hernandez, the Regional Education Board Chair, was speaking into the microphone. And now, the moment many of you have been waiting for, this year's recipient of the National Teacher of the Year Award. The lights had dimmed. A video screen behind the stage showed footage of classrooms, students, lessons in action. 3 tables away from me, my mother sat with my stepfather Gerald and my half-brother Marcus. She was wearing an expensive dress, diamond earrings catching the light, her expression polite but bored. She'd made her opinion of my career very clear just 20 minutes ago, during the cocktail hour before the ceremony. "He's just a babysitter with a diploma," she'd told a group of people I didn't recognize. Her voice had carried across the room. I kept hoping he'd do something meaningful with his life. But here we are. 33 years old, and he's still dealing with other people's children. I'd been standing 15 feet away, getting a glass of water from the bar. Had heard every word, had felt each one like a physical blow. But now, sitting in this ballroom, watching Dr. Hernandez smile at the audience, I felt something different: vindication. This year's National Teacher of the Year, Dr. Hernandez continued, is someone who has revolutionized how we think about education, someone who has created innovative programs that have been adopted by schools nationwide, someone who has changed hundreds of lives through dedication, creativity, and unwavering commitment to their students. My principal, Ellen Kowalski, reached over and squeezed my hand. She was sitting next to me, grinning like she knew a secret. Because she did. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Hernandez said, "please join me in congratulating Mr. Elliot Camden, 5th grade teacher at Riverside Elementary, your National Teacher of the Year." The room erupted in applause. I stood on shaking legs and walked toward the stage, and watched as my mother's jaw literally dropped open, her face going pale, her champagne glass freezing halfway to her lips. Let me back up and explain how we got here. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. My name is Elliot Camden, 33 years old, 5th grade teacher at Riverside Elementary School. I've wanted to be a teacher since I was 8 years old. My 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Rebecca Walsh, had changed my life. I'd been a struggling reader, anxious kid, bullied on the playground. She'd seen something in me, had stayed after school to tutor me, had encouraged my love of science and storytelling, had made me feel like I mattered. "You're going to do amazing things, Elliot," she told me once. "You're smart and kind and creative. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I'd never forgotten that. Never forgotten how one teacher had made me feel valued when everyone else had made me feel small. So when it came time to choose a career, the decision had been obvious. I'd study education. I'd become a teacher. I'd be for other kids what Mrs. Walsh had been for me. My mother had been horrified. "Teaching," she'd said when I'd declared my major freshman year of college. "Elliot, you're too smart for teaching. You could be a doctor, a lawyer, something important." "Teaching is important," I'd said. "Teaching is a fallback career for people who can't do anything else. You're settling." "I'm not settling. This is what I want to do." "You'll regret it. Teachers make no money, get no respect, spend their days babysitting other people's children. Is that really what you want from life?" "Yes," I'd said firmly. "That's exactly what I want." She'd been disappointed in me ever since. My father had died when I was 6. A car accident that had left my mother a widow at 32 with a young son. She'd remarried when I was 10 to Gerald Whitmore, a successful commercial real estate developer. They'd had my half-brother Marcus when I was 12. Marcus had always been the favorite, the golden child. He'd gone to business school, gotten his MBA, joined Gerald's company, made six figures by age 28, bought a house in an expensive neighborhood, drove a luxury car, everything my mother had wanted for me. I'd chosen a different path, had graduated with my teaching degree, had gotten my credential, had started teaching at Riverside Elementary at age 24. For 9 years I'd taught 5th grade, math, science, social studies, language arts, had helped hundreds of kids learn and grow, had watched struggling readers become confident students, had seen anxious children blossom into leaders, and every year my mother had made comments. When are you going to get a real job? Don't you want to make actual money? Teaching is fine for women, but don't you think you should be more ambitious? Marcus just got another promotion. He's doing so well. Gerald is so proud. Each comment had stung, but I'd kept teaching anyway, because I loved it, because it mattered, because I was good at it, and because this year, everything had changed. It had started 18 months ago, at the beginning of last school year. I'd been frustrated with the standardized curriculum. It was rigid, boring, disconnected from students' lives. Kids were memorizing facts for tests, but not actually learning to think critically or apply knowledge to real situations. The breaking point had come during a math lesson about percentages. I'd been teaching the standard curriculum, calculating tips, discounts, sales tax. Students had been completing worksheets mechanically, calculating answers without understanding why any of it mattered. "Mr. Camden," Sophie Martinez had asked, "when are we ever going to use this?" It was the question teachers hear constantly, and usually we give some vague answer about real-world applications without actually demonstrating those applications. But that day, Sophie's question had hit differently, because she was right. Worksheets about fictional shopping scenarios weren't teaching her anything meaningful, so I'd changed course entirely. "You know what? You're right. Let's forget the worksheet. Let me ask you all something. What problems exist in our community that you care about?" Hands had shot up immediately. Homelessness. Pollution. "The park near my house is dirty and broken. Some kids don't have enough food." "Okay, let's talk about food insecurity. Who knows what that means?" Several students had raised hands. We'd discussed it. Families who don't have reliable access to nutritious food, working parents who can't afford healthy groceries, kids who depend on school meals. "How many people in our community do you think experience food insecurity?" I'd asked. 100? Someone guessed. 1,000? Another student suggested. "Let's find out. Who wants to help me research this?" What followed had been 3 weeks of the most engaged learning I'd ever seen. Students had researched local food insecurity statistics. They'd discovered that 18% of families in our county experienced food insecurity, over 12,000 people. We'd analyzed data, created graphs showing percentages, calculated how many school-age children were affected, figured out how much food would be needed to help. Then we'd expanded the project. Language arts became writing persuasive letters to parents and community members about the food drive. Social studies became understanding the root causes of poverty and food insecurity. Science became studying nutrition and food preservation. The students had designed and run a school-wide food drive campaign, created posters, made announcements, organized collection boxes in every classroom. They'd collected over 2,000 pounds of food, had partnered with the local food bank to deliver everything, had met families who benefited from their work, and along the way they'd learned more math, science, social studies, and language arts than any textbook could have taught them. Sophie Martinez, who'd asked when we'd ever use percentages, had been the one to calculate that our food drive had collected enough to provide meals for approximately 400 families for 1 week. "This matters, Mr. Camden," she'd said, showing me her calculations. "Like, we actually helped people. That's so much better than worksheets." That had been the beginning. The second major project had been environmental conservation. It had started when Marcus Chen, One of my students had mentioned that his family went hiking in the nearby state park every weekend. "It's getting really trashed," he'd said during our morning meeting. "There's litter everywhere. Some of the trails are eroding. My dad says if people don't take care of it, they might have to close parts of it." "That sounds like a problem worth solving," I'd said. "Should we tackle it?" The class had been enthusiastic. We'd started with research. Students studied local ecosystems, what plants and animals lived in the park, how the ecosystem functioned, what threats it faced. They'd learned about carbon footprints, had calculated the school's carbon emissions based on energy usage, transportation, waste production, had been shocked to discover how much impact even a small elementary school had on the environment. "So what can we do about it?" I'd asked. Students had brainstormed solutions: recycling program, composting, energy conservation, reducing paper waste, carpooling incentives. They'd designed a comprehensive waste reduction plan for the school, had created presentations showing the current situation, proposed solutions, expected outcomes, and implementation timeline. And then they'd presented to the school board. 27 fifth graders, dressed professionally, standing in front of school board members and administrators, making the case for environmental action. "Our school produces approximately 800 pounds of waste per week," Jasmine Williams had said, showing a graph. "Of that, about 60% could be recycled or composted. That means we're sending nearly 500 pounds of recyclable material to landfills every week. Over the school year, that's approximately 16,000 pounds of waste that didn't need to be waste." The school board had been impressed, had approved a pilot recycling and composting program, had allocated budget for implementation. My students had designed the bin labels, created the sorting guidelines, trained other classes on proper waste disposal. Within 3 months, the school's landfill waste had dropped by 47%. "We made a real difference," Marcus had said proudly. "Like, the environment is actually better because of what we did." The third project had been the most ambitious: designing a community playground. It had started during a discussion about geometry and measurement. Instead of having students calculate the area and perimeter of abstract shapes, I'd asked, "What if we designed something real? Something that could actually be built?" "Like what?" students had asked. "What does our community need?" Elena Rodriguez had immediately said, "A playground. The one near my apartment is broken. It's not safe. My mom won't let me play there." "Okay, let's design a playground." The project had integrated everything. Math became calculating dimensions, budgets, material quantities. Science became understanding physics. How high should slides be? How should swings be anchored? What makes equipment safe? Social studies became researching community needs through surveys and interviews. Language arts became writing proposals and persuasive arguments. Students had surveyed over 200 community members about what they wanted in a playground, had analyzed the data to identify the most desired features. They'd created scale models using cardboard, clay, and other materials, had calculated costs based on researching actual playground equipment prices. They'd written a formal proposal including needs assessment, design specifications, budget breakdown, and implementation timeline. And then they'd presented to the city council. I'd never been more nervous in my life. We'd spent weeks preparing. Students had practiced their presentation over and over. But still, city council? That was intimidating even for adults. But my students had been incredible. Elena had opened, "Good evening. We're the 5th grade class from Riverside Elementary, and we're here to present a solution to a problem affecting over 300 children in the Meadowbrook neighborhood." She'd clicked through slides showing photos of the broken, unsafe playground, statistics about child obesity and the importance of outdoor play, results from their community survey. "Children need safe places to play," Elena had continued. "Our current playground is 28 years old. Equipment is broken, rusted, or missing. Parents don't feel comfortable letting their kids play there. So kids stay inside, watch screens, don't get exercise or fresh air." Marcus had presented the design specifications. We surveyed 217 community members about what they wanted. The top priorities were safety, accessibility for children with disabilities, variety of age-appropriate equipment, and shade structures. Our design incorporates all of these. Jasmine had handled the budget presentation. Based on our research, implementing this design would cost approximately $85,000. This includes equipment, installation, safety surfacing, and landscaping. We've identified 3 potential funding sources: city recreational budget allocation, state community development grant, and local business sponsorships. They'd answered questions from council members thoughtfully and professionally, had demonstrated understanding beyond their years. The council had been moved. One member had actually wiped away tears. "This is the most impressive presentation I've seen from any constituent group this year," Councilwoman Patricia Morris had said. "You've done more thorough research than most adult advocacy groups. I'm making a motion to allocate funds for this project immediately." The motion had passed unanimously. 6 months later, Meadowbrook Community Playground had opened, designed by 5th graders. Built because they'd identified a need, developed a solution, and advocated for change. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, the mayor had specifically credited my students. These young people saw a problem in their community and didn't just complain about it, they solved it. That's the kind of civic engagement we need. My students had been there, beaming with pride. Elena had actually cut the ribbon, had stood on that new playground equipment she'd helped design, and cried happy tears. "We built this, Mr. Camden," she'd said. "We actually built this." By the end of that first year of implementing project-based learning, my students had completed 6 major projects, had learned math, science, social studies, and language arts more deeply than traditional curriculum could have taught them. But more importantly, they'd learned that their voices mattered, that they could identify problems and create solutions. That learning wasn't something that happened in isolation from real life. It was a tool for changing the world. And their test scores? They'd been the highest in the school. 93% had scored proficient or advanced in math, 96% in language arts, 100% in science. Turns out when students are engaged in meaningful work, they learn better. Who knew? Principal Kowalski had been amazed. "Elliot, what you're doing is revolutionary. Have you thought about documenting this? Sharing it with other teachers?" "I've been keeping detailed records," I'd said. "Lesson plans, project frameworks, assessment rubrics, student work samples. Everything is documented. This needs to be published, shared. This is too good to keep to one classroom." She'd helped me write a proposal. We'd submitted it to the State Education Board, describing the program and its outcomes. Within 2 weeks, I'd been invited to present at the State Education Conference. Had stood in front of 300 teachers and administrators, explaining project-based learning through real-world problem-solving. The response had been overwhelming. Teachers had lined up afterward to ask questions. "Can I use your curriculum? Will you share your project frameworks? How do I implement this in my own classroom?" I'd created a website, had uploaded all my materials for free. Lesson plans, project templates, assessment rubrics, implementation guides, everything teachers would need to try project-based learning in their own classrooms. Within the first month, the website had been visited by over 5,000 teachers. My materials had been downloaded 1,800 times. Within 6 months, over 200 teachers across 43 states had contacted me saying they'd implemented versions of my program. I'd started getting emails, messages from teachers describing their experiences. "Mr. Camden, I've been teaching for 20 years and was getting burned out. Your program reignited my passion for teaching. My students are more engaged than they've been in years. Thank you. Our school adopted your project-based framework district-wide. Test scores are up, discipline referrals are down, and teachers report higher job satisfaction. Your work is changing entire schools. I teach in a Title I school, where students have traditionally struggled. Your program has been transformative. Students who were failing are now thriving. You've given us tools that actually work for kids who need them most. Each email had been humbling. I developed this program for my own classroom to help my own students. I'd never imagined it would spread across the country. But apparently, teachers everywhere were feeling the same frustration I'd felt. We're looking for ways to make learning more meaningful. We're tired of curriculum that disengaged students and reduced learning to test preparation. My program had offered an alternative, a way to maintain rigor while making learning joyful, a way to prepare students for tests and for life, a way to teach content and critical thinking simultaneously. One email had come from Dr. Patricia Hernandez, the Regional Education Board Chair. Mr. Camden, I've been following your work with great interest. Your project-based learning program represents exactly the kind of innovation our education system needs. I'd like to nominate you for National Teacher of the Year. Would you be interested? I'd read that email 5 times before believing it was real. National Teacher of the Year, the most prestigious teaching award in the country. Given to one teacher annually out of 3.7 million educators nationwide. The award that would require my mother to finally acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, teaching wasn't just babysitting with a diploma. The application process had been intense. I'd had to submit a 50-page portfolio documenting my teaching philosophy, curriculum innovations, student outcomes, community impact, and professional development activities. I'd had to provide letters of recommendation from administrators, colleagues, parents, and former students. I'd had to film a teaching demonstration video showing my classroom in action. I'd had to write essays answering questions about education policy, equity, innovation, and leadership. Principal Kowalski had helped me every step of the way. "You're going to win this," she'd said. "I know you are. What you've created is exactly what the selection committee is looking for." "There are thousands of amazing teachers," I'd said. "I'm just one person doing my job." "You're not just doing your job, you're changing how people think about education. That's different." The submission deadline had been in January. I'd sent everything in and tried not to think about it. In March, I'd gotten an email saying I was a state finalist, one of 50 teachers nationwide who'd advanced to the next round. In April, I'd had to do a virtual interview with the selection committee. 4 education experts asking me detailed questions about my teaching practice, my philosophy, my vision for education. I'd been so nervous I'd barely slept the night before. But the interview had gone well. I'd spoken passionately about why project-based learning mattered, how it engaged students, how it prepared them for real-world challenges. In June, I'd learned I was one of 10 national finalists. The award ceremony would be held in September at the Regional Education Gala. All finalists would be flown in, given accommodations, honored at the event, and one of us would be named National Teacher of the Year. I'd told my mother about being a finalist, thought maybe, finally, she'd be proud. "That's nice, dear," she'd said. "Marcus just closed a $15 million deal. Gerald is taking him to celebrate in Napa this weekend." Not congratulations, not pride, just comparison to Marcus. I'd stopped expecting anything different. The gala was scheduled for September 22nd, black tie event, over 400 attendees, major donors, politicians, education leaders. I'd never been to anything like it. Principal Kowalski had insisted on helping me prepare. "You need to look the part. This is a huge honor. You're representing not just yourself, but our school and our district." She'd taken me shopping, had helped me select a proper suit, charcoal gray, tailored fit, professional but not stuffy, a crisp white dress shirt, a burgundy tie, black dress shoes that actually looked expensive. "You clean up nice," she'd said when I'd tried everything on. "Now you look like the award-winning educator you are." The invitation had said I could bring up to 3 guests. I'd invited Principal Kowalski, obviously, and my 2 closest colleagues, Sarah Martinez and James Chen, who both taught 5th grade and had helped me develop parts of the project-based curriculum. I'd also, reluctantly, invited my mother. "There's an education gala next month," I'd told her over Sunday dinner at her house. "I'm being honored as a state finalist for a national teaching award. I have an extra ticket if you'd like to come." She'd exchanged a look with Gerald. "When is it?" "September 22nd, Saturday evening, black tie event at the Riverside Convention Center." "We have Marcus's birthday dinner that night," Gerald had said. "Actually, his birthday is the 24th, I'd pointed out, 2 days later. "We're celebrating early because we have a vacation planned. Sorry, Elliot, we can't make it." "It's a pretty significant honor," I'd pressed. "National recognition. Only 10 teachers in the entire country were selected as finalists." My mother had sighed. "Elliot, I'm sure it's very nice, but we've already committed to Marcus's celebration. Maybe next time." There wouldn't be a next time. This was a once-in-a-career opportunity. "Fine," I'd said. "I understand." But then, 3 days before the event, my mother had called. "Elliot, we've decided to come to your awards thing after all. Marcus's girlfriend had a work conflict, so we're postponing his birthday dinner." "The gala," I'd corrected. "Not awards thing. The Regional Education Gala honoring National Teacher of the Year finalists." "Right, that. We'll need 3 tickets. Gerald, Marcus, and me." I'd wanted to say no. Wanted to tell her she'd made her priorities clear, and I'd invited other people instead. But she was still my mother, and some small part of me still hoped she'd finally be proud. "I'll add you to the guest list," I'd said. September 22nd had been unseasonably warm. I'd spent the morning grading papers and reviewing my acceptance speech, just in case I won, which I didn't actually expect. There were 10 finalists, all of them incredible educators with amazing programs. A high school science teacher who'd developed a renewable energy curriculum, an elementary music teacher who'd created an adaptive music program for students with disabilities, a middle school math teacher whose students had won national competitions. I was honored just to be in their company. The gala started at 6 p.m. with a cocktail hour. The actual ceremony would begin at 7:30. I'd arrived at 6 sharp with Principal Kowalski, Sarah, and James. We'd checked in, gotten our table assignment, table 17 close to the stage, and headed to the ballroom. The space was stunning. Crystal chandeliers hanging from 20-foot ceilings, round tables draped in white linens with gold accents, centerpieces made of books stacked artfully with flowers spilling from the top. A stage with a massive screen behind it, currently showing a slideshow of students and teachers from across the region. "This is incredible," Sarah had said, looking around. "I feel like we're at the Oscars." "The education Oscars," James had agreed. We'd grabbed drinks from the bar, I'd gotten just water, too nervous to drink alcohol, and started mingling. That's when my mother had arrived. She'd walked in wearing a cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, diamond earrings that Gerald had bought her for their anniversary, her hair styled professionally, makeup perfect. Marcus had been with her, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo. Gerald had worn his usual confident expression, the look of a man who belonged at upscale events. "Elliot," my mother had called, spotting me. "There you are? What a lovely venue. Very impressive." "Thanks for coming," I'd said. Of course, we wouldn't miss it. "Now, where are we sitting?" I'd checked the seating chart. "You're at table 23. It's table 23? That's quite far from the stage. Can't we sit with you?" "My table is reserved for school staff, but table 23 has other families and education board members. You'll have good company." She'd looked disappointed but hadn't argued. We'd mingled for a bit. My mother had introduced herself to several people as Elliot's mother, though he gets his work ethic from his stepfather, Gerald, here. I'd been talking with Dr. Hernandez about next year's curriculum expansion when I'd heard my mother's voice across the room. She'd been standing with a group of people I didn't recognize, probably other parents or donors, holding a glass of champagne, laughing. "Yes, that's my son Elliot," she'd been saying. "The teacher. I kept hoping he'd do something meaningful with his life, but here we are." 33 years old, and he's still dealing with other people's children. He's just a babysitter with a diploma, really. The group had laughed politely, awkwardly. I'd frozen, standing 15 feet away with Dr. Hernandez, hearing my mother dismiss my entire career to strangers. Dr. Hernandez had noticed my expression, had followed my gaze to my mother, had heard the comment. Her expression had hardened. "Is that your mother?" "Yes," I'd said quietly. "I see." She'd paused. "Elliot, can I share something with you? Off the record?" "Of course." "You won. You're going to be announced tonight as National Teacher of the Year. The committee made the final decision 2 weeks ago. We've been keeping it confidential to make the announcement more impactful." I'd stared at her. "I won?" "You won. And that woman over there who just called you a babysitter with a diploma? She's about to learn exactly how wrong she is." At 7:30, everyone had taken their seats. The lights had dimmed. A video began playing on the screen, highlights from schools across the region, students learning, teachers teaching, communities celebrating education. Dr. Hernandez had taken the stage to welcome everyone, had spoken about the importance of recognizing educational excellence, had thanked sponsors and donors. Then she'd introduced the 10 National Teacher of the Year finalists. One by one, our names and photos had appeared on the screen. Each of us had stood when called, waved to applause, sat back down. When my name was called, Elliot Camden, 5th grade, Riverside Elementary, recognized for his innovative project-based learning program that has been adopted by over 200 schools nationwide. I'd stood and waved. My mother had clapped politely from table 23, her expression pleasant but distant. After all 10 finalists had been recognized, Dr. Hernandez had continued with other awards: Distinguished Principal, Innovative Program of the Year, Community Partnership Excellence. Each award had been accompanied by a video highlighting the recipient's achievements. Each recipient had come on stage to accept a crystal trophy and give a brief speech. The ceremony had been moving, inspirational, a celebration of people who dedicated their lives to education. And then, finally, Dr. Hernandez had said the words that changed everything. "And now, the moment many of you have been waiting for." The lights had dimmed further. The video screen had lit up with footage of my classroom, my students working on the food bank project, graphing data, writing persuasive essays, loading boxes of donated food into trucks. Then the environmental project, students measuring tree coverage, creating presentations, speaking to the school board. The playground project, kids designing, building models, presenting to city council. The video showed student interviews, kids talking about how much they loved school now, how they'd learned that their voices mattered, how Mr. Camden had taught them they could change their community. Parent interviews, mothers and fathers saying their children were excited about learning for the first time, that they came home talking about projects instead of complaining about homework. Administrator interviews, Principal Kowalski saying I'd revolutionized what education could be. The superintendent saying my program was the most effective teaching innovation he'd seen in 30 years. The video had been about 4 minutes long. By the end, people in the audience had been wiping their eyes. The screen faded to black. Dr. Hernandez had spoken into the microphone. "This year's National Teacher of the Year is someone who has fundamentally changed how we think about education. Someone who looked at our traditional system and asked, how can we make this better? How can we make learning meaningful?" I'd gripped the edge of the table, my heart pounding. This teacher has developed a program that connects curriculum to real-world problems, that empowers students to be active citizens, that proves learning can be both rigorous and joyful. Principal Kowalski had squeezed my hand. This teacher's work has been downloaded and implemented by over 200 schools in 43 states, has been featured in educational journals and conferences nationwide, has changed the lives of not just their own students, but thousands of students across the country. Sarah and James had been grinning at me. This teacher proves that with creativity, dedication, and innovation, one person can transform education. I'd glanced across the room at table 23. My mother had been sipping champagne, looking mildly interested but not particularly engaged. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating Mr. Elliot Camden, 5th grade teacher at Riverside Elementary, your National Teacher of the Year. The room had erupted. Standing ovation. Applause that seemed to shake the walls. People cheering. I'd stood on legs that barely worked and walked toward the stage, and had watched as my mother's face had transformed. First, confusion. Did she hear the name right? Then recognition. Yes, that's her son they're calling. Then shock. He won? The national award? Her champagne glass had frozen halfway to her lips. Her jaw had literally locked open. Her eyes had gone wide. Gerald had looked stunned. Marcus had been clapping mechanically, his expression bewildered. But my mother had just sat there, frozen, as 400 people gave her babysitter with a diploma son a standing ovation for being named the best teacher in America. I'd climbed the stairs to the stage in a daze. Dr. Hernandez had handed me a crystal trophy, heavy, substantial, engraved with my name and National Teacher of the Year. The applause had continued. I'd stood at the podium, looking out at 400 faces, trying to process that this was real. Finally, the applause had died down enough for me to speak. "Thank you," I'd said, my voice shaking slightly. I'm honestly overwhelmed. This is beyond anything I ever imagined." I'd paused, gathering my thoughts. I became a teacher because my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Rebecca Walsh, changed my life. I was struggling, anxious, didn't believe in myself, and she saw something in me. She stayed after school to help me. She encouraged me. She made me feel like I mattered. I'd looked down at the trophy in my hands. That's what teachers do. We see potential in students who don't yet see it in themselves. We create spaces where kids can discover who they are and what they're capable of. We don't just teach content, we teach confidence, curiosity, courage. The room had been completely silent, everyone listening. The project-based learning program that this award recognizes isn't just about my classroom. It's about proving that education can be different, that we don't have to choose between rigor and joy, that we don't have to prepare students for tests or for life. We can do both. I'd glanced at table 23. My mother had been staring at me, her expression unreadable. Someone recently referred to teaching as babysitting with a diploma, and you know what? In some ways, they're not entirely wrong. Teaching does involve caring for children, keeping them safe, nurturing their growth. I'd paused deliberately. But it's also so much more than that. Teaching is designing learning experiences that transform how students think. It's analyzing data to understand where each child needs support. It's developing curriculum that connects to real-world applications. It's being a counselor, a mentor, a coach, an advocate, and yes, sometimes a caretaker. I'd looked directly at my mother now. Teaching is one of the most complex, demanding, and important professions that exists. And anyone who diminishes it simply doesn't understand what actually happens in a classroom every single day. The room had burst into applause again. People had been nodding, some wiping away tears. To my students, past, present, and future, thank you for teaching me as much as I've taught you. To my colleagues who've supported this work and implemented it in their own classrooms, thank you for believing in this vision. To Principal Kowalski, who encouraged me to think bigger, thank you for your leadership. I'd looked at the trophy again. And to anyone who's ever been told their work doesn't matter, that their job isn't important, that they should have aimed higher, don't believe it. What matters isn't how much money you make or how impressive your title sounds. What matters is the impact you have on people's lives. And teachers, we change lives every single day. The standing ovation had been immediate and thunderous. I'd walked off the stage holding my trophy, shaking hands with Dr. Hernandez, barely processing what had just happened. I'd won National Teacher of the Year out of 3.7 million educators nationwide. and my mother had heard every word of my speech. After the ceremony, there had been a reception. More mingling, congratulations, photos with the other award winners. I'd been surrounded by people wanting to shake my hand. Superintendents from other districts asking about implementing my program. Journalists asking for interviews. Teachers thanking me for advocating for the profession. It had been overwhelming and wonderful. Principal Kowalski had been beaming. "I told you. I knew you'd win." "I still can't believe it," I'd said. "Believe it. You earned this. Now, I think your mother wants to talk to you." I'd turned to see my mother approaching, Gerald and Marcus trailing behind her. Her expression had been complex. Part pride, part embarrassment, part something I couldn't quite identify. "Elliot," she'd said, reaching me. "Congratulations. This is incredible." "Thank you. I had no idea. I didn't realize your work was so significant." "I've been doing this work for 9 years," I'd said quietly. "It's always been significant. You just didn't think it was worth paying attention to." She'd flinched. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You called me a babysitter with a diploma. Tonight. Less than an hour ago. To strangers." Her face had gone red. "I didn't know you'd hear that." "That doesn't make it better. It actually makes it worse. You were comfortable saying it as long as you thought I wouldn't hear." Gerald had stepped forward. "Elliot, your mother is proud of you. We all are. What you've accomplished is remarkable." "Thank you, Gerald. I appreciate that. But I didn't accomplish this remarkable thing overnight. I've been working toward this for years, building this program, helping students, making a difference. None of that mattered until there was a trophy involved." Marcus had spoken up, looking uncomfortable. "That's not true, man. Mom talks about your teaching all the time." "No, she doesn't," I'd said. "She talks about how I should have become a doctor, how teaching isn't a real career, how I'm wasting my potential. Those are the things she says." My mother had tears in her eyes now. I'm sorry I haven't been more supportive. I wanted you to have financial security, success. I worried you'd struggle." "I do have success. I have students who love learning, colleagues who respect my work, a program that's changing education nationwide, and now national recognition as the best teacher in America. Why wasn't that enough for you until now?" She'd been silent. "I need some air," I'd said, walking away from them toward the balcony. I'd been standing on the balcony for about 10 minutes, looking at the city lights, trying to process everything, when I'd heard the door open behind me. My mother had stepped out, alone this time. "Can we talk?" she'd asked. "If you want to." She'd come to stand next to me at the railing, quiet for a moment. "I was wrong," she'd finally said. "About teaching, about your career, about everything." "Okay." "When you said you wanted to be a teacher, I panicked. I thought you were limiting yourself. I thought you could do more." "More than changing hundreds of children's lives?" I know how that sounds now. But you have to understand, when your father died, we had nothing. I struggled so much financially. I was terrified every month about making rent, buying groceries, keeping the lights on. I didn't want that for you." I'd turned to look at her. She'd been crying now, mascara starting to run. "When I married Gerald, everything changed. Financial security, stability. I could breathe. And I wanted you to have that same security. I wanted you to never worry about money the way I had. So you pushed me toward careers you thought would make me rich." "Yes. And I was wrong. Because you're not rich in money, but you're rich in everything else that matters. You're respected, valued, making a real difference. And I was too blind to see it until someone handed you a trophy. I didn't need the trophy for my work to matter." "I know. That's what makes me the worst kind of parent. I needed external validation to see what I should have seen all along, that my son is extraordinary." We'd stood in silence for a minute. "The speech you gave," she'd continued, "about teaching being more than babysitting. You were talking about what I said." "Yes. You heard me. In the cocktail hour." "I heard you. Dr. Hernandez heard you too. That's when she told me I'd won. Said she wanted me to know before the announcement because she knew what was coming." My mother had covered her face with her hands. "I'm so ashamed. You should be. Not because of the trophy, but because you've spent 9 years dismissing work that matters, work that's changing lives, work that I love. How do I fix this?" "I don't know if you can, Mom. An apology doesn't erase 9 years of feeling like you were disappointed in me. Like I was a failure because I didn't choose a career you approved of. You're not a failure. You're the opposite of a failure. You're Teacher of the Year, nationally. Do you know how incredible that is?" "I do. I've always known my work was valuable. I just wish you'd known it too." She'd wiped her eyes, smearing makeup. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Why did you invite me tonight? After everything I've said, everything I've done, why did you want me here?" I'd thought about that question. Had asked myself the same thing 100 times. Because part of me still hoped you'd see me, really see me, see the work I do, the lives I change, the difference I make. I wanted you to be proud of me for who I am, not who you wanted me to be. I am proud. I'm so proud I can barely breathe. And I'm so sorry it took this long for me to say it. I appreciate that. Is there any way, can we start over? Can I learn about your work? Actually understand what you do? Be the mother you deserved from the beginning? I'd looked at her, really looked at her, seen the genuine remorse, the tears, the regret. "We can try," I'd said finally. "But you have to understand, this isn't about you being proud now that there's a trophy involved. This has to be about you actually valuing education, valuing teachers, valuing the work I do every single day, regardless of recognition." "I understand. I'll do better, I promise." "Okay, then let's try." She'd hugged me then, tight, desperate, like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go. "Thank you," she'd whispered. "Thank you for giving me another chance." The next morning, I'd woken up to find my phone had exploded with notifications. 47 missed calls, 163 text messages, my email inbox showing 200+ unread messages. The National Teacher of the Year announcement had made national news. My speech, particularly the part about teaching being more than babysitting with a diploma, had gone viral. More Than Babysitters was trending on social media. Teachers across the country were sharing their own stories of being dismissed, undervalued, told their work didn't matter. News outlets were requesting interviews. Good Morning America wanted me for Tuesday. The local news wanted a segment for that evening. Educational podcasts wanted me as a guest. My phone had rung. An unknown number. "Hello? Mr. Camden, this is Jessica Torres from the Department of Education. The Secretary of Education would like to speak with you about your project-based learning program and potentially implementing it as a pilot program in underserved districts nationwide. Would you be available for a call this week?" Yes, absolutely. The recognition kept coming. Universities were inviting me to speak. School districts were requesting consultations. Publishers wanted to turn my curriculum into a book. Within a week, I'd received over 300 emails from teachers wanting to implement my program. Within 2 weeks, my website had been visited by educators from all 50 states and 12 countries. The impact was overwhelming. "This is bigger than you now," Principal Kowalski had said during a meeting to discuss how to handle all the attention. "This has become a movement. You've given teachers a voice, given the profession validation. That speech resonated with millions of people who needed to hear it." I just said what needed to be said. "Exactly. And now you have a platform to keep saying it." 2 weeks after the gala, my mother had called and asked if she could visit my classroom. "I want to see what you do," she'd said. Actually watch you teach. Understand your program. Would that be okay? I'd been surprised, but had agreed. Sure, come on Thursday. We're starting a new project about renewable energy. Thursday morning, my mother had arrived at Riverside Elementary at 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes before school started. I'd been setting up the classroom, laying out materials, queuing up videos, writing the day's objectives on the board. "This is your room?" she'd asked, looking around. "This is my room." She'd walked slowly around the space, looking at student work displayed on the walls, reading the project descriptions, examining the science equipment, the books, the technology. "How many students do you have?" 27 this year. That's actually higher than ideal, but budget constraints mean we can't have smaller class sizes. "And you teach all subjects?" "All core subjects. Math, science, social studies, language arts. They have specialists for art, music, and PE, but I handle everything else." That's a lot. It is, but it allows for integration. I can connect the math lesson to the science project to the writing assignment. Everything builds on everything else. The bell had rung. Students had started filing in, greeting me cheerfully. "Good morning, Mr. Camden." "Morning, Sophie." "Hi, Marcus. Jasmine, love the backpack." They'd all noticed my mother. "Who's that?" "This is Mrs. Whitmore. She's visiting today to see how our classroom works." "Cool. Are you a teacher too?" "No," my mother had said. "I'm just here to learn." The morning had been project kickoff day. I'd started with a hook, showed a video about climate change, and asked students what they thought we could do to help. Hands had shot up, ideas had poured out. I'd written everything on the board without judgment: solar panels, wind turbines, recycling programs, electric cars, tree planting. Then I'd explained our new project. Each group would research one renewable energy source, calculate its efficiency and cost, design a plan for implementing it at our school, and present to the administration. You'll learn about energy science, financial analysis, persuasive communication, and environmental impact. And if your plan is good enough, we might actually get to implement it. The excitement had been palpable. Students had immediately started discussing ideas, claiming groups, planning research. I'd moved around the room, facilitating, asking questions, redirecting when needed. My mother had watched everything, watched me teach, watched students engage, watched learning happen organically through curiosity and challenge. At lunch, she'd sat in the back of the classroom while I'd eaten with students who'd stayed inside. They'd asked her questions. "Are you Mr. Camden's mom?" "Yes." "That's cool. Mr. Camden is the best teacher ever. He makes learning fun." "He won an award, National Teacher of the Year. Did you see?" I did see. I was there. "Wasn't it awesome? Our teacher is famous." My mother had smiled, tears forming again. It was very awesome. By the end of the day, after students had left, my mother had been sitting at a student desk while I'd cleaned up and prepared for tomorrow. "I had no idea," she'd said quietly. "No idea what?" "How hard this is. How much you do. How much skill it takes to manage 27 kids while teaching them multiple subjects, while keeping them engaged, while handling behavioral issues, while differentiating instruction. It's incredible. It's teaching. It's what teachers do every day. But I never saw it, never understood it. I just saw the salary and the hours and I thought it wasn't enough. It's more than enough for me." She'd stood up, walked over to me. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for 9 years of not understanding, for dismissing this, for calling it babysitting, for every comment I made about you needing a real job. I appreciate that. This is a real job. It's maybe the most real job there is. You're shaping who these kids become. That's massive. It is. I'm going to do better. I'm going to talk about your work differently, understand it better, be the supportive mother you deserved all along." "Thank you, Mom." It's been a year since the gala, 12 months since I stood on that stage holding a crystal trophy and gave a speech that changed my relationship with my mother and apparently sparked a national conversation about the value of teachers. I'm sitting in my classroom on a Friday afternoon. School ended 20 minutes ago. Most teachers have left. But I'm still here, as I am most Fridays, preparing for next week. On my desk sits that crystal trophy, National Teacher of the Year. I keep it in my classroom, not at home. This is where the work happens. This is where it belongs. The past year has been surreal in ways I'm still processing. The project-based learning program is now being implemented in over 800 schools nationwide, from rural communities in Montana to urban districts in New York. Elementary schools, middle schools, even some high schools adapting the framework for older students. The Department of Education has funded a 3-year pilot program in 50 underserved districts. They're calling it the Camden Curriculum Initiative, which still feels strange to me. It's not about me. It's about the students. But apparently, putting my name on it helps with funding and recognition. I've received grant money totaling over $400,000 to expand the program, to develop more project frameworks, to create teacher training materials, to build an online platform where teachers can share projects and resources. I've spoken at conferences in 12 states, been featured in educational journals, podcasts, news programs, was interviewed on Good Morning America, where the host introduced me as the teacher who's revolutionizing American education. I've written a book, Beyond Babysitting, Revolutionizing Education Through Real-World Learning. It's being used in teacher preparation programs at over 60 universities. Publishers are saying it's one of the best-selling education books in 5 years. But here's what matters most. I'm still teaching 5th grade at Riverside Elementary, still working with 27 students, still developing projects that connect learning to life, because that's what this has always been about. Not the awards, not the recognition, the students. This year's class is working on their 4th major project. They're designing a plan to reduce plastic waste in our community, have partnered with local businesses to develop alternatives, are presenting to the city council next month. Yesterday, one of my students, a quiet girl named Maria who struggled with confidence, stood up during project work time and said, "I think we should reach out to the grocery stores too. If we can convince them to offer reusable bag discounts, more people will use them." She'd calculated that if grocery stores offered a 25-cent discount per reusable bag, and if that incentive increased reusable bag usage by just 30%, the community would reduce plastic waste by approximately 12,000 bags weekly. "That's over 600,000 bags per year," Maria had said, showing her calculations to the class. That's real impact. 2 years ago, Maria wouldn't have spoken up in class at all. Now she's leading environmental analysis and making policy recommendations. That's why I teach. My mother comes to visit my classroom once a month now, every first Friday. She arrives at 2 p.m. and stays until 4, helping with whatever projects students are working on. Today she's here, sitting at a table with 5 students, helping them research plastic alternatives. She's patient with them, encouraging, genuinely interested in their work. "Mrs. Whitmore," Marcus Lee asks, "do you think businesses will actually listen to us? We're just kids." My mother pauses, considers her answer. A year ago, I would have said no. But then I watched Mr. Camden's students convince the city council to build a playground. I watched them implement a school-wide recycling program. I've learned that when kids have good ideas and present them well, adults listen. You're not just kids. You're citizens with valuable perspectives. Marcus beams, continues researching with renewed confidence. After students leave, and it's just my mother and me, we sit in the quiet classroom together. "Thank you for coming," I say. "The kids love when you're here." "I love being here," she says. And then, after a pause, "I've been thinking about something. About that night at the gala. About what I said during cocktail hour." "Mom, we've talked about this. You've apologized. We've moved on." "I know. But I need you to understand something. It wasn't just about that one comment. It was about years of not seeing you. Years of dismissing your work. I need you to know how deeply I regret that. I know you do. Do you? She looks at me directly. Because I wake up some mornings and think about all the parent-teacher conferences I skipped, all the classroom events I said I was too busy for, all the times you tried to tell me about your students, and I changed the subject. I was an awful mother. You weren't awful. I was. Not awful in the traditional sense. I fed you, clothed you, paid for college, but I wasn't proud of you, and you deserved a mother who was proud of you from the beginning, not just after you won an award. We sit in silence for a moment. Can I tell you about last week? She asks. Sure. I was at the country club, having lunch with some of the same women who were there at the gala cocktail hour, the ones who heard me call you a babysitter with a diploma. I wince at the memory. One of them asked how you were doing, asked if you were still teaching, and I got to say, yes, Elliot is still teaching. He's National Teacher of the Year. His program is being implemented in schools nationwide. He's written a book that's being used in universities. He's changing American education. And I'm so proud of him I can barely breathe. She's crying now. I hand her a tissue. And then she said, that must have been so validating for you at the gala, watching him win. And you know what I said? What? I said, actually, the most validating moment was when I visited his classroom and watched him teach. That's when I understood who my son really is. Not a trophy winner. A teacher who changes lives every single day. I feel my own eyes getting wet. I visit your classroom every month, she continues, not because I'm trying to make up for the past, though I am, but because being here reminds me what matters, what real success looks like. It's not Marcus closing real estate deals. It's you teaching Maria to believe in herself. Marcus is doing well too, I say. His work matters also. It does. And I'm proud of him. But I'm proud of you differently, because you're doing something irreplaceable. Marcus could stop working tomorrow and someone else would close those deals, but if you stopped teaching, 27 kids would lose someone who sees their potential. That's not replaceable. The word hangs in the air. Replaceable. The word that started all of this. I was so wrong, she says. You're not just irreplaceable as a teacher. You're irreplaceable as a son, and it took me 33 years and a crystal trophy to see it. I'm so sorry. I forgive you, Mom. I forgave you at the gala. I keep forgiving you every time you show up here and actually see the work I do. Thank you. She wipes her eyes. Now tell me about next month's project. I want to help. We spend the next hour planning. She offers to contact some of her business connections to speak to my class about corporate sustainability initiatives. Volunteers to help chaperone the field trip to the recycling facility. Takes notes on what materials we'll need. This is who she's become. Not perfect. Still sometimes says things that reveal she doesn't fully understand teaching, but trying, learning, growing, and that's all I ever wanted. Later that night, I'm at home grading project proposals when my phone rings. Unknown number. Hello? Mr. Camden? This is Angela Morrison. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I've been following your work since the Teacher of the Year announcement. I'd like to make a documentary about your program and its impact on education reform. Would you be interested in discussing this? A documentary? Yes. We've already contacted several schools that use your curriculum. Interviewed teachers, students, administrators. The stories are incredible. This could help spread your program even further, inspire more teachers to innovate. I think about it. More exposure means more teachers might implement project-based learning. More students might benefit. I'm interested, I say. But I have one condition. What's that? The documentary can't be about me as some hero teacher. It needs to be about the students, about what happens when we give kids meaningful work and believe in their capability, about all the teachers who are implementing this, not just me. I can absolutely work with that. In fact, that makes for a better documentary. Deal? Deal. We schedule a meeting for next week. After hanging up, I sit with the weight of it all. A documentary, a book, speaking engagements, federal grants, 800 schools, all because I got frustrated with boring curriculum and decided to try something different. All because I believe students deserved better than worksheets. All because I became a teacher to make a difference, and then actually worked every day to do it. The trophy sits on my bookshelf at home. Sometimes I look at it and still can't believe it's real. But then I think about Sophie Martinez, who learned that math matters when she calculated food for 400 families. About Marcus Chen, who learned that science matters when he designed a waste reduction plan that reduced the school's environmental impact by 47%. About Elena Rodriguez, who learned that her voice matters when she convinced the city council to build a playground. About Maria, who learned that she matters when she stood up in class and shared her ideas about plastic waste reduction. Those are the real trophies. Not crystal, not engraved, but real. Students who believe they can change the world because someone taught them how. That's what teaching is. That's what I do. And if my mother, or anyone else, ever questions whether teaching is just babysitting with a diploma, I'll invite them to spend a day in my classroom, watch students research community problems, watch them analyze data and develop solutions, watch them present to real adults about real issues and make real change happen. Watch them transform from anxious kids who don't believe in themselves into confident young people who know their voices matter. Then tell me what I do isn't important. Then tell me it's just babysitting. I dare you. Because here's what I've learned. Teaching isn't about delivering curriculum. It's about seeing potential in students who don't see it in themselves. It's about creating spaces where curiosity becomes knowledge and knowledge becomes action. It's about designing experiences that connect learning to life, that show students their work matters, that prove they can change their communities. It's about being a counselor when they're struggling, a cheerleader when they succeed, an advocate when they need support, a guide when they're lost. Teaching is complex, demanding, exhausting, and absolutely critical, and I wouldn't trade it for any other career in the world. And anyone who can't see that? Well, maybe they just need to spend a day in a classroom, actually see what teaching is, actually understand what we do. Then tell me we're just babysitters. I dare them.